misconceptions about rape or rape myths serve a function in the sense that first they silence women because women feel that because of these misconceptions they will not be believed. Secondly, they let rapists off the hook because if women are going to be silent and if these misconceptions, as they do, blame women and suggest that women cause rape, then rapists will not be punished for the crimes that they commit. So ultimately, it's important to dispel these misconceptions because by dispelling them, one, women will tend to speak out more. Two, women will get a chance to actually gain justice in the criminal justice system because members of the criminal justice system, such as police officers, judges, lawyers, and prospective jurors, will have a better understanding about rape. One major misconception about rape is the idea that somehow women ask for rape. The idea is that by simply being in a man's room, being in a man's car, being in a man's hotel, that somehow you agree to have rape. I mean, that is what that rape myth suggests, that somehow you asked for it. Well, first of all, women do not ask for rape. It's a violent crime about power and control and domination, and women don't ask for that. Just because a woman is in a man's room, hotel room, car, or apartment does not mean that she consented to have sex. So we can't assume that because a woman was someplace that she told the man that yes, we can engage in sex. So certainly women do not ask for rape. It is forced on them, and it is something that a man forces a woman to do. It is a crime and a violent act. Another popular myth about rape is that women, for the most part, lie about rape. In fact, that most women lie about rape, that only a few women have been raped. Well, first of all, rape is a very, very common occurrence. And FBI statistics, which are very conservative, they're the most conservative statistics that we have about rape. And FBI statistics suggest that rape is not a crime where people are any more falsely accused than any other felonies. And that percent is around 2%. So only about 2% of rapes are rapes that include fraudulent charges. And again, that is no more than the fraudulent charges for other felonies. Such as for the felony crimes, such as robbery, those kinds of things. So the idea is that most women indeed are telling the truth about rape, and in fact, most rapes are still going unreported. So usually when a woman does step out there, for the most part, you have a greater chance of believing that she's telling the truth than that she's lying. Certainly in high-profile rapes, you end up with the myth about not only the fact that women are lying, but that these men don't have to rape to get sex. And so the idea is that people assume that these men can get sex easily, so they don't have to lie, so they don't have to rape. Well, first of all, most rapists have, believe it or not, normal sex lives, active normal sex lives. And the rape is what's abnormal about their sexual life. So these rapists can be married, they can be athletes who can get a lot of sex if they want to. The idea is that they're willing their power, they're using power and control against a woman so that it's not an issue if they can get sex easily. It's an issue of the way that they get sex is a way that is violent. They like the whole idea of the dominating force behind the sexual activity that they're engaging in. So to assume that a woman is lying because someone such as a Mike Tyson can get sex easily combines the two myths, one that women are lying, and then the second one is that he doesn't have to rape to get sex. The idea is that he gets a charge out of getting sex in a violent way. Unfortunately, there's a misunderstanding about the fact that some women have consented to some type of sexual contact, but that does not mean they have consented to the complete sexual intercourse act. Sometimes people misunderstand the need for affection and assume that because the person wanted to be affectionate, that they wanted to have the complete act of sex. So you have people who believe that if a woman said that she had been kissing the man prior to that time, or if the woman said that, yes, we were heavy petting, but then I asked him to stop, some people believe that, well, you didn't have a right to because you teased him and you led him on. This misunderstanding is that men cannot control their sexual impulses. It puts the blame on women for men not controlling their behavior. The idea is that no means no, and at any point in the relationship or in the sexual encounter, if a woman says, I would like to stop here, then that no and that request should be respected. That women are not responsible for men's sexual impulses. Men are responsible for their sexual impulses. So even if a woman admits to wanting some kind of sexual activity, if she says she does not want you to penetrate her, that she does not want to engage in that complete act of sex, then that means no. And not only does no mean no, but I'm not sure should be interpreted as no. Let's wait should be interpreted as no. I don't know should be interpreted as no. The idea is that men need to accept full responsibility for their actions. And when they're confused, and if that man feels like he's getting mixed messages, then he should stop and clarify. Well, research has shown that women react quite differently after they have been raped. There's no standard way that a woman acts when she has been raped. Some women are crying and very upset, whereas other women appear very calm, mainly because they're in shock. Some women may look like definitely they've been physically abused, that they have bruises, that they show cuts, depending upon how violent the act was. In other women, you may not see the wounds. They may just really be the internal psychological wounds that most women who have been raped certainly carry. So there's no standard reaction to rape. For instance, people said that if Desiree Washington in the Mike Tyson case had been raped, then why was she dancing the next day? The idea is that people can react differently. It depends upon what are your coping mechanisms prior to the assault. Some people cope better than other people in general. Better meaning that you wouldn't know. Let's say it's not saying that's the best way to cope, but it's just saying that we have different coping styles. You can't assume that because someone is not flat out on the floor hysterical, like maybe you think you might be, that that's how everyone else should react. There are very, very different reactions, and it really depends upon their coping mechanisms and the way they cope prior to the rape. This myth suggests that, again, that women cause rape. And the idea is that rape will stop when men stop raping women, not when women stop dressing a certain way. Women have been raped with all kinds of clothing on. So to suggest that someone had on something provocative and that somehow caused the rape is a myth, because women have been raped regardless of what they have on. In fact, most women who are raped do not have any type of so-called provocative clothes on. Secondly, it just suggests that somehow women have to always do something to keep men in check. This suggested, for instance, if you take women's self-defense courses, then somehow that guarantees that you won't be raped, and it does not. The idea is that a man, you can take all the self-defense courses in the world, but if he holds a gun to your head, that will not prevent you from being raped either. Even if you could freeze, you could panic and not be able to truly protect yourself because you're just in a state of shock. The idea here again is that rape will stop when men start recognizing that no means no, when men start taking responsibility for their actions, when men start understanding that when a woman rejects, when a woman says, for instance, I would not like to have sex, that does not mean that she is rejecting him as a person. That does not mean that somehow his ego has to feel deflated in any way. So once again, we need to put the emphasis on what men can do, since they are the ones who are perpetrating this crime. That most rapists are men, and even when men are raped, they are raped by men. So the emphasis needs to be on what men can do to stop rape, not what women can do, because ultimately there's no guarantee that a woman will not be raped. This is really one of those just kind of one of the ugliest kinds of rape myths, because it suggests that rape is simply sex. And that if a woman just relaxes, then she would enjoy sex, for instance, like she would enjoy sex in any other circumstance. I mean, there are just so many assumptions there about even how women enjoy sex, for instance. But saying that if a woman relaxes, that she can just somehow enjoy it, really misses the fact that rape is a violent crime of power and control, where someone is forcing himself on another person. And that to ask someone to relax when they are being attacked and to suggest that somehow they may enjoy it truly means that you don't understand that it's violence through sexual activity as opposed to just sexual activity. This is one of the most popular myths about rape, and that is that most rapes occur between strangers. We now know, based upon just a lot of research, and really good nationwide studies, for instance, by Mary Koss and her colleagues, we know that most rapes occur between people who know each other. Now, to what degree they know each other varies, but it's usually the person, you've seen that person before, they've seen you before. It could be on a date, it could be a family member, it could be a husband, it could be some other relative. Usually the person does know the other person or has seen the other person. Stranger rapes are actually in the minority at this point. But that classic Hollywood mythical stranger jumping out of the bushes with a knife or some other weapon is really a myth, and we need to destroy that, because what it suggests is that women, for the most part, are going to be raped by people they know. What's most interesting about rape myths and research on misconceptions about rape is that not only do all women have to deal with these rape myths, but women of color, and Black women in particular, have to deal with not only sexist rape myths, but racist ones. So there are a category of misconceptions about rape that are race specific. For instance, there is this idea that Black men are they're the stereotypical ideal classic rapists. Now, what we know, and what even the FBI knows, okay, not just psychologists who are doing this research, but the FBI, the criminal justice system knows that for the most part, men rape women of the same racial background as well as socioeconomic background. So white men tend to rape white women, Black men tend to rape Black women, Asian men tend to rape Asian women, and so on and so forth. Because of the way racism works with sexism in this country, you find that the belief is that somehow that Black men are the ones who are doing all of the rape. And then that white women are the only women who are being raped. But for the most part, Black men rape Black women and white men, white women. What you find in the way the media handles the situation, which contributes to the misconception about rape, is that when Black men rape white women, these rapes get more attention in the media. And as a result, because people hear about those rapes more, they start believing that, and they start believing erroneously, that this is what's happening most frequently. So what we also know is that when you do have interracial rapes, because you do have certainly Black men raping white women, and you do have white men raping Black women, and so forth and so on, that when you do have these interracial rapes, they're a small number. In fact, FBI statistics have suggested that only about 4%, in fact, only about 3%, let's say, of the rapes are between Black men and white women. And actually 4% is slightly higher for white men raping Black women. The point in general is that it's just low, period. That most rapes occur between people of the same race. So there's no need to quibble about the 3 and 4% that are interracial rapes. The point is that people rape each other or men rape women mainly of the same race and socioeconomic background. There are stereotypes of Black women that interact with these misconceptions about rape. For instance, the idea that somehow black women are these sexual beings who, one, don't respond the same way to rape because we're used to rough sex. And this certainly is a myth that comes from slavery, and the idea of somehow black women are these lewd women who are just so overly sexed. And of course, that feeds the same myth about black men being the typical rapist, that black people in general have these high sex drives and that rape does not affect us in the same way. Well, black women, like any women, can respond to rape in many different ways. And black women have had to deal with a lot of different stressors and different forms of oppression in this country and in other places. So just because a black woman may respond to a rape, for instance, in a seemingly calm way, does not mean that she's not hurting inside. Many black women have been taught not to show their emotions and that, hey, you just have to take it. It's a rough world out there. Many feel like, look, I don't have time to cry. I have bills to pay. And even women who have worked in rape crisis centers have misinterpreted this way of coping as meaning that somehow black women aren't affected by rape the same way as white women. No, this is just a myth, and that black women cope in various ways with their rape experiences, and many just have so many other problems to deal with that they just shut it out. It doesn't mean that it's not affecting them. It doesn't mean that somehow they like to be raped. It doesn't mean that they're unrapeable victims because of some alleged high sex drive. It just means that they have a lot on them. Black women, we as black women have so many pressures that many women who are raped feel that they just have too many other things to do and that they just want to put it behind them. There's this misconception again that unless a woman fits this good woman profile, that is really another myth about women that's very sexist, that you have good women and bad women. Usually the so-called alleged good women are women who are of the middle classes or higher, and there's this belief that they make better rape victims because lawyers have an easier time to defend them given that they have these so-called pristine lifestyles. And so women who are of the working classes or poor, or women who are sex workers, for instance, that they could never be raped because they're usually just crack addicts, or they usually are just sex workers, and that anybody who's a sex worker can't say no to sex. Well, you do have these class differentials, and that's because there's a class-based society. So it certainly affects the way people get justice in the criminal justice system, and it certainly affects the way poor women get justice versus women who have some kind of financial leverage. Well, the idea is that whether someone's a crack addict or a sex worker, no means no. Just because someone is a sex worker, for instance, doesn't mean that she has said yes to every guy who wanted to have sex with her. So yes, a sex worker, a prostitute, can be raped because people assume that she's out there and that she is fair game for anyone. But she is a worker. She expects to be paid. And so it's really a myth and a misconception that someone who is a prostitute cannot say no. But you do have officers of the court, and you do have police officers who believe that, oh, well, she doesn't have the right to press a charge because she works the streets, or she doesn't have a right to press a charge because she is a crack addict. And that just is not true, that everybody has a right under the law. And they have the right for justice and to get justice in this system. And although they usually don't get justice, it does not mean that they don't have that right to it. And that we make an assumption that because they're poor or because of their life situations, they don't deserve to get justice. This is a real big and problematic stereotype, because when you do have women who are of a group who are oppressed because of their race and because of their gender, you do have the racial group trying to protect the overall group by doing things sometimes that really work against the group. So let's say with African Americans, you have this sensitivity to the fact that certainly black men are criminalized in this system, and that black men do face various stereotypes in this system. Well, black women face similar stereotypes and are also criminalized in other ways. And so the question becomes, does a black woman break ranks with black people when she files a charge against a black man for rape? And does she not contribute to the stereotype that black men are rapists when she reports her crime? And shouldn't she just be quiet and not air our dirty laundry in public, because it would be contributing to all black people looking bad? Well, the way I approach that as a research psychologist is that you do not refute negative stereotypes by creating these unrealistic positive stereotypes. So you don't fight the stereotype that black men are seen as rapists. You don't counter that by saying black men aren't raping. Okay, neither are true. I mean, certainly black men are not the stereotypical rapists, and they're not the only rapists. But at the same time, black men are raping. They're not raping more than white men. They're raping, period. And they're certainly being disproportionately sentenced when compared to white men, for instance. We know that there are these disparities in sentencing and so forth, so that more black men are indeed serving time for rape were disproportionately serving time for rape than white men, because there are more white men than black men. So there are more white men actually in prison for rape than black men. It's just disproportionate. Well, you don't refute these rape misconceptions with new misconceptions. What you do is point out, as I have, that because of the racism in the criminal justice system, you certainly have disproportionately more black men in prison for it than white men. But again, it doesn't mean that these black men are not raping. So for the African American community to say that we should not air our dirty laundry in public, in another way, it's saying that we should allow black men to rape for the sake of making sure that we don't contribute to a stereotype. Well, that's not, again, how you fight stereotypes. We know that people hold stereotypes, and they're very hard to change. Who you're trying to reach, really, when you're trying to refute rape myths, are people who are open-minded and people who are searching for the truth, or people who are not sure. So we know that these attitudes are just very, very difficult to change. So whether you report a rape or not report a rape, does not necessarily change the attitude per se. What we're trying to do is make sure that people get justice when crimes have been prevented against them. But most psychologists will tell you it is very, very difficult to change people's attitudes. So to think that the fact that black women are reporting black men is somehow contributing to the stereotype just isn't true. The stereotype exists whether they report these crimes or not. All right, what we're trying to do, again, is just educate you about the fact that these stereotypes really hide the truth. And the truth is that men rape in general, and that black men are not raping any more than white men, and that we don't solve the problem by then saying that black men don't rape, or that let's be quiet about it. We have to look at also how homophobia interacts with sexism and racism when it comes to even black lesbian women being raped. For the most part, most women and most black women are silent about their rapes. And then when a black woman is a lesbian, you also have the issue of the stereotypes about lesbian women, and the stereotype that lesbian women have to somehow hate men, and they're trying to harm men and harm black men in particular. Well, that really further silences the rapes of Black lesbian women. And even their treatment plans, when a person is trying to recover from a rape who is a Black lesbian, that has to be taken into consideration. That the issue of homophobia and the issue of a person feeling that, especially if they are not openly lesbian, if they are not out of the closet, that they will be somehow further mistreated because they are lesbian. And so you have many Black lesbian women, especially Black lesbian women who are closeted, which would be the majority, then you have them not speaking up, and you have this gross injustice there as well. Silence hurts us more so than speaking out. Speaking out can only help us in the sense that it gives a person a chance not only for justice, which certainly isn't guaranteed, but it also gives a person a chance to heal better. You heal better if you at least tell one person. And that we know is true, that it's best to at least tell one person you can trust. But of course, that person has to be someone that is not going to use other rape misconceptions against you when you're telling your story, that they're not going to be judging you and saying, well, why were you there? Now, that certainly does not help the healing process, which is, again, why so many Black women remain silent, because they feel that they will be judged. The funny thing about rape misconceptions is that most people have them and hold them and have learned them. So that would include jurors, judges, lawyers, police officers. Everyone can benefit from rape prevention education. And some lawyers, or at least let's say the prosecution, may use a psychologist to help screen prospective jurors, but sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And a great thing to do would be to screen them for these rape misconceptions, because people hold them. I mean, most people have these misconceptions. And that would mean the jurors as well. And that would mean they would be holding the ones about how Black men are the major rapist, and that white women somehow seem like better rape victims than Black women and more believable ones, and so forth and so on. So all of these myths would come into play because jurors are everyday people. But a judge, who's to say that a judge doesn't hold these myths? They don't take a course on rape misconceptions in the criminal justice system, lawyers, so anyone. Because it's a sexist society, and sexism is such that women are blamed for all kinds of things. And so because this is a sexist society and we are products of this society, then we have that in us, and it's a matter of having to unlearn them. When you're doing anti-rape education in the African American community, it's also important to emphasize how very subtle things, or seemingly subtle things, contribute to a climate that creates an environment where women are much more easily raped. Things like gangster rap, stereotypes about Black women create this hostile environment where women's lives, Black women's lives, are not respected. And if you're going around, for instance, calling Black women names or putting Black women down, it's easy to make the next leap to disrespect this Black woman. So we have to look at ways that certain magazine ads, certain lyrics and music, certain television programs, radio talk show programs, how these programs contribute to negative images of Black women that create a hostile environment for Black women, and therefore perpetuate myths about Black women that ultimately feed these misconceptions and these myths about rape as it relates to Black women. In the research that I've conducted on anti-rape activists, and these anti-rape activists being African American women and men anti-rape activists, we found that again, when you emphasize a Black feminist perspective, a feminist perspective that also puts feminism within a Black racial context, that both Black women and Black men are more receptive to the information. We use, for instance, principles of the Nguzo Saba to talk about collective responsibility, unity, in the course of trying to make sure that people understood that this is not a white thing, that this affects our community, and that community values are violated when black men rape black women, and that we have to start looking at it from that perspective. When you do that, we found that we got much more support for anti-rape activism and people who really could see more clearly how they had misconceptions about rape.